I'm very lucky. My day job is a climatologist, but I'm also a paleoclimatologist, so I study past climates. And one of my passions is actually looking at the climate records as we go back in time. And one of the defining features of the last 2.5 million years is that we've cycled in and out of these huge ice ages. Now, if we go back 18,000 years ago, we had huge ice sheets across the northern hemisphere. So we look at North America, we have the Laurentide ice sheet, and actually it was 3 kilometers thick over Chicago. We then go to Europe, we see that we had the Scottish ice sheet, which was a couple of kilometers thick, and the Fenno-Scandinavian one as well. And then about 11,000 years ago, in the natural cycle of things, these ice sheets melted, and we came into a very stable interglacial period that we call the Holocene. So the last 11,000 years, we've had incredibly stable climate. Now for me, the most important thing was at the beginning of that, humans, as soon as we came out of an ice age, spontaneously in 4 different locations around the world, went from being hunter-gatherers to actually domesticating animals and plants to then start agriculture. And this occurred in Americas, in Africa, in the Middle East, and in China. Completely separate. Different species, no communication. So we came out and we've had this wonderful stable period. Now, the interesting thing about interglacials is there is a slow cooling through an interglacial, and then actually we would be expecting, if we weren't interfering with the climate, perhaps we would be starting to drop into the next ice age in the next 1,000 years or so. And so there is this cooling curve. And we know that in the 1970s, many scientists were concerned about this, and perhaps we were on the cusp of this. But that was because of a lack of real understanding of the fine detail of how climate changes. And so what we now know is that greenhouse gases changed early on in this Holocene period. We've seen that CO2, instead of continuing down as it usually does in other interglacials, about 6,000 years started to go up. About 5,000 years ago, methane started to go up. And what we think happened now was the early agriculturalists, those pastoralists, actually changed the greenhouse gases. So we think the small, and it's only a very small increase of CO2, was due to deforestation and the spread of agriculture throughout the world. And we think the methane is actually partly because of the huge amount of wet rice agriculture that was occurring in China. And this then had this slow increase, and that small increase in greenhouse gases, which is incredibly small compared with what we've done in the last 100 years, was just enough to make sure that our planet wasn't actually going to drop into the next ice age. But one of the really interesting questions is, are we in a new geological period? Are we actually in what we call the Anthropocene? Have we stopped the ice ages? Now, we don't know, but a key thing is if we keep this climate change going up, then maybe we'll have changed the natural cycles and we will have prevented the next ice age. But actually we're going to cause ourselves huge amounts of problems because it's the speed that we're changing climate which is exceptional in geological history. A lot of people that study climate change sometimes despair because, of course, the world has been very slow to react. Again, we've been talking about climate change for the last 35 years. We've been showing evidence. We've been showing even more evidence. And it's taken a long time for politicians and for people to actually realize the underlying science is solid and that actually we are causing a problem to the planet and, more importantly, to ourselves. But I'm an optimist. What I see is that we humans are incredibly adaptable. We are incredibly inventive. We have technology that we can produce. Actually, all that's holding us back at the moment from actually dealing with climate change and dealing with the other issues around the world is that we are now still locked into political systems, both internationally and at the national level, that were set up in the middle of the 20th century. Now, the interesting thing is that these were fantastic. So after the Second World War, the Allies sat down and built a new world. They'd spent 10 years previously working out how the peace could actually work out. So the World Bank, the UN, the International Monetary Fund were all set up at the Bretton Woods Conference in 1945. Key starts to the modern world. They also said that, of course, the dollar should be the international currency, and this will make you laugh that basically $1 was set at the gold standard of 35 ounces. Oh, now that's worth a lot more than that now. But we've now moved into the 21st century, and we know that these systems are not suitable for the 21st century. So what we now need to do is look at our world as a collective, realize that humans are actually controlling the environmental destiny and the evolutionary destiny of the only place in the universe that we know life exists, and actually say, okay, how are we going to make sure that we look after the 10 billion people that will be here by 2050? How do we look at the environment? And how do we actually think we can actually survive this century in the best way? Now, again, we've done it in the 20th century, reinvented ourselves and reinvented human society. So we can definitely do it again in the 21st century. So I'm an optimist, and in many ways, I think that things like climate change, which are massive challenges for us, actually will bring the best out in humanity.